Chapter 12. 12th chapter. It was a Saturday afternoon, gay and brilliant after abundant rains, and the spirit of youth dwelt in it, though the season was now autumn. All that was gracious triumphed. As the motor cars passed through Summer Street, they raised only a little dust, and their stench was soon dispersed by the wind and replaced by the scent of the wet birches or of the pines. Mr. Beebe, at leisure for life's amenities, leant over his rectory gate. Freddie leant by him, smoking a pendant pipe. "Suppose we go and hinder those new people opposite for a little." They might amuse you." Freddie, whom his fellow creatures never amused, suggested that the new people might be feeling a bit busy, and so on, since they had only just moved in. "I suggested we should hinder them," said Mr. Beebe. "They are worth it." Unlatching the gate, he sauntered over the triangular green to Sissy Villa. "Hello," he cried, shouting in at the open door, through which much squalor was visible. A grave voice replied, "Hello." "I've brought someone to see you." "I'll be down in a minute." The passage was blocked by a wardrobe which the removal men had failed to carry up the stairs. Mr. Beebe edged round it with difficulty. The sitting room itself was blocked with books. "Are these people great readers?" Freddie whispered. "Are they that sort?" "I fancy they know how to read, a rare accomplishment. What have they got?" "Byron." "Exactly. A Shropshire lad. Never heard of it. The Way of All Flesh. Never heard of it. Gibbon. Hello. Dear George reads German. Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. And so we go on. Well, I suppose your generation knows its own business. Honeychurch." "Mr. Beebe, look at that," said Freddie in awe-struck tones. On the cornice of the wardrobe, the hand of an amateur had painted this inscription: "Mistrust all enterprises that require new clothes." "I know. Isn't it jolly? I like that. I'm certain that's the old man's doing." "How very odd of him. Surely you agree?" But Freddie was his mother's son, and felt that one ought not to go on spoiling the furniture. "Pictures," the clergyman continued, scrambling about the room. "Giotto, they got that at Florence, I'll be bound." "The same as Lucy's got." "Oh, by the by, did Miss Honeychurch enjoy London?" "She came back yesterday." "I suppose she had a good time." "Yes, very," said Freddie, taking up a book. "She and Cecil are thicker than ever." "That's good hearing." "I wish I wasn't such a fool, Mr. Beebe." Mr. Beebe ignored the remark. "Lucy used to be nearly as stupid as I am, but it'll be very different now, Mother thinks. She will read all kinds of books." "So will you." "Only medical books, not books that you can talk about afterwards. Cecil is teaching Lucy Italian, and he says her playing is wonderful. There are all kinds of things in it that we have never noticed. Cecil says, 'What on earth are those people doing upstairs? Emerson, we think we'll come another time.'" George ran downstairs and pushed them into the room without speaking. "Let me introduce Mr. Honeychurch, a neighbor." Then Freddie hurled one of the thunderbolts of youth. Perhaps he was shy, perhaps he was friendly, or perhaps he thought that George's face wanted washing. At all events, he greeted him with, "How do you do? Come and have a bathe." "Oh, all right," said George, impassive. Mr. Beebe was highly entertained. "How do you do? How do you do? Come and have a bathe," he chuckled. "That's the best conversational opening I've ever heard, but I'm afraid it will only act between men. Can you picture a lady who has been introduced to another lady by a third lady opening civilities with, 'How do you do? Come and have a bathe,' and yet you will tell me that the sexes are equal?" "I tell you that they shall be," said Mr. Emerson, who had been slowly descending the stairs. "Good afternoon, Mr. Beebe. I tell you they shall be comrades, and George thinks the same." "We are to raise ladies to our level?" the clergyman inquired. "The Garden of Eden," pursued Mr. Emerson, still descending, "which you place in the past, is really yet to come. We shall enter it when we no longer despise our bodies." Mr. Beebe disclaimed placing the Garden of Eden anywhere. "In this, not in other things, we men are ahead. We despise the body less than women do, but not until we are comrades shall we enter the garden. I say, what about this bathe? Murmured Freddie, appalled at the mass of philosophy that was approaching him. I believed in a return to nature once, but how can we return to nature when we have never been with her? Today, I believe that we must discover nature. After many conquests, we shall attain simplicity. It is our heritage. Let me introduce Mr. Honeychurch, whose sister you will remember at Florence. How do you do? Very glad to see you, and that you are taking George for a bathe. Very glad to hear that your sister is going to marry. Marriage is a duty. I am sure that she will be happy, for we know Mr. Vyse too. He has been most kind. He met us by chance in the National Gallery and arranged everything about this delightful house. Though I hope I have not vexed Sir Harry Otway. I have met so few liberal landowners, and I was anxious to compare his attitude towards the game laws with the conservative attitude. Ah, this wind! You do well to bathe. Yours is a glorious country, Honeychurch. Not a bit, mumbled Freddie. I must. That is to say, I have to. Have the pleasure of calling on you later on, my mother says, I hope. Call, my lad. Who taught us that drawing-room twaddle? Call on your grandmother. Listen to the wind among the pines. Yours is a glorious country. Mr. Beebe came to the rescue. Mr. Emerson, he will call, I shall call. You or your son will return our calls before 10 days have elapsed. I trust that you have realized about the 10 days interval. It does not count that I helped you with the stare-eyes yesterday. It does not count that they are going to bathe this afternoon. Yes, go and bathe, George. Why do you dawdle talking? Bring them back to tea. Bring back some milk, cakes, honey. The change will do you good. George has been working very hard at his office. I can't believe he's well. George bowed his head, dusty and sombre, exhaling the peculiar smell of one who has handled furniture. Do you really want this bathe? Freddie asked him. It is only a pond, don't you know? I dare say you are used to something better. Yes. I have said yes already. Mr. Beebe felt bound to assist his young friend and led the way out of the house and into the pine woods. How glorious it was! For a little time the voice of old Mr. Emerson pursued them, dispensing good wishes and philosophy. It ceased, and they only heard the fair wind blowing the bracken and the trees. Mr. Beebe, who could be silent but who could not bear silence, was compelled to chatter, since the expedition looked like a failure, and neither of his companions would utter a word. He spoke of Florence. George attended gravely, assenting or dissenting, with slight but determined gestures that were as inexplicable as the motions of the tree-tops above their heads. And what a coincidence that you should meet Mr. Vyse. Did you realize that you would find all the pension Bertolini down here? I did not. Miss Lavish told me. When I was a young man, I always meant to write a history of coincidence. No enthusiasm. Though, as a matter of fact, coincidences are much rarer than we suppose. For example, it isn't purely coincidentally that you are here now when one comes to reflect. To his relief, George began to talk. It is. I have reflected. It is fate. Everything is fate. We are flung together by fate, drawn apart by fate. Flung together, drawn apart. The 12 winds blow us. We settle nothing. You have not reflected at all, rapped the clergyman. Let me give you a useful tip, Emerson. Attribute nothing to fate. Don't say, I didn't do this, for you did it, 10 to 1. Now I'll cross-question you. Where did you first meet Miss Honeychurch and myself? Italy? And where did you meet Mr. Vyse, who is going to marry Miss Honeychurch? National Gallery. Looking at Italian art, there you are, and yet you talk of coincidence and fate. You naturally seek out things Italian, and so do we and our friends. This narrows the field immeasurably we meet again in it. It is fate that I am here, persisted George, but you can call it Italy if it makes you less unhappy. Mr. Beebe slid away from such heavy treatment of the subject, but he was infinitely tolerant of the young and had no desire to snub George. And so for this, and for other reasons, my history of coincidence is still to write. Silence. Wishing to round off the episode, he added, "We are all so glad that you have come." Silence. "Here we are," called Freddie. "Oh, good," exclaimed Mr. Beebe, mopping his brow. "In there's the pond. I wish it was bigger," he added apologetically. They climbed down a slippery bank of pine needles. There lay the pond, set in its little alp of green. Only a pond, but large enough to contain the human body and pure enough to reflect the sky. On account of the rains, the waters had flooded the surrounding grass, which showed like a beautiful emerald path, tempting these feet towards the central pool. "It's distinctly successful, as ponds go," said Mr. Beebe. "No apologies are necessary for the pond." George sat down where the ground was dry and drearily unlaced his boots. "Aren't those masses of willow herb splendid? I love willow herb in seed. What's the name of this aromatic plant?" No one knew or seemed to care. These abrupt changes of vegetation, this little spongeous tract of water plants, and on either side of it all the growths are tough or brittle, heather, bracken, hurts, pines. Very charming, very charming. "Mr. Beebe, aren't you bathing?" called Freddie as he stripped himself. Mr. Beebe thought he was not. "Water's wonderful," cried Freddie, prancing in. "Water's water," murmured George. Wetting his hair first, a sure sign of apathy, he followed Freddie into the divine, as indifferent as if he were a statue, and the pond a pail of soapsuds. It was necessary to use his muscles. It was necessary to keep clean. Mr. Beebe watched them, and watched the seeds of the willow herb dance chorically above their heads. "A pooshoo, a pooshoo, a pooshoo," went Freddie, swimming for 2 strokes in either direction, and then becoming involved in reeds or mud. "Is it worth it?" asked the other, Michelangelesque on the flooded margin. The bank broke away, and he fell into the pool before he had weighed the question properly. Poof, I've swallowed a pollywog, Mr. Beebe. Water's wonderful. Water's simply ripping." "Water's not so bad," said George, reappearing from his plunge and sputtering at the sun. "Water's wonderful. Mr. Beebe, do?" "A pooshoo, coof." Mr. Beebe, who was hot and who always acquiesced where possible, looked around him. He could detect no parishioners except the pine trees, rising up steeply on all sides and gesturing to each other against the blue. How glorious it was! The world of motor cars and rural deans receded inimitably. Water, sky, evergreens, a wind. These things not even the seasons can touch, and surely they lie beyond the intrusion of man. I may as well wash too, and soon his garments made a third little pile on the sward, and he too asserted the wonder of the water. It was ordinary water, nor was there very much of it, and, as Freddie said, it reminded one of swimming in a salad. The 3 gentlemen rotated in the pool breast high, after the fashion of the nymphs in Götterdämmerung. But either because the rains had given a freshness, or because the sun was shedding a most glorious heat, or because 2 of the gentlemen were young in years and the 3rd young in spirit, for some reason or other a change came over them, and they forgot Italy and botany and fate. They began to play. Mr. Beebe and Freddie splashed each other. A little deferentially, they splashed George. He was quiet. They feared they had offended him. Then all the forces of youth burst out. He smiled, flung himself at them, splashed them, ducked them, kicked them, muddied them, and drove them out of the pool. "Race you round it, then," cried Freddie, and they raced in the sunshine, and George took a short cut and dirtied his shins, and had to bathe a second time. Then Mr. Beebe consented to run, a memorable sight. They ran to get dry, they bathed to get cool, they played at being Indians in the willow herbs and in the bracken, they bathed to get clean. And all the time 3 little bundles lay discreetly on the sward, proclaiming, "Number, we are what matters. Without us shall no enterprise begin. To us shall all flesh turn in the end." "A try! A try!" yelled Freddie, snatching up George's bundle and placing it beside an imaginary goalpost. "Soccer rules," George retorted, scattering Freddie's bundle with a kick. Goal! Goal! Pass! Take care, my watch, cried Mr. Beebe. Clothes flew in all directions. Take care, my hat. No, that's enough, Freddie. Dress now. No, I say. But the two young men were delirious. Away they twinkled into the trees, Freddie with a clerical waistcoat under his arm, George with a wide-awake hat on his dripping hair. That'll do, shouted Mr. Beebe, remembering that after all he was in his own parish. Then his voice changed as if every pine tree was a rural dean. Hi, steady on. I see people coming, you fellows. Yells and widening circles over the dappled earth. Hi, hi, ladies. Neither George nor Freddie was truly refined. Still, they did not hear Mr. Beebe's last warning, or they would have avoided Mrs. Honeychurch, Cecil, and Lucy, who were walking down to call on old Mrs. Butterworth. Freddie dropped the waistcoat at their feet and dashed into some bracken. George whooped in their faces, turned and scudded away down the path to the pond, still clad in Mr. Beebe's hat. Gracious alive, cried Mrs. Honeychurch. Whoever were those unfortunate people? Oh, dears, look away, and poor Mr. Beebe, too. Whatever has happened? Come this way immediately, commanded Cecil, who always felt that he must lead women, though he knew not whither, and protect them, though he knew not against what. He led them now towards the bracken where Freddie sat concealed. Oh, poor Mr. Beebe. Was that his waistcoat we left in the path? Cecil, Mr. Beebe's waistcoat. No business of ours, said Cecil, glancing at Lucy, who was all parasol and evidently minded. I fancy Mr. Beebe jumped back into the pond. This way, please, Mrs. Honeychurch, this way. They followed him up the bank, attempting the tense yet nonchalant expression that is suitable for ladies on such occasions. Well, I can't help it, said a voice close ahead, and Freddie reared a freckled face and a pair of snowy shoulders out of the fronds. I can't be trodden on, can I? Good gracious me, dear, so it's you. What miserable management. Why not have a comfortable bath at home, with hot and cold laid on? Look here, mother, a fellow must wash, and a fellow's got to dry, and if another fellow— Dear, no doubt you're right as usual, but you are in no position to argue. Come, Lucy. They turned. Oh, look, don't look. Oh, poor Mr. Beebe, how unfortunate again. For Mr. Beebe was just crawling out of the pond, on whose surface garments of an intimate nature did float, while George, the world-weary George, shouted to Freddie that he had hooked a fish. And me, I've swallowed one, answered he of the bracken. I've swallowed a pollywog. It wriggleth in my tummy. I shall die. Emerson, you beast, you've got on my bags. Hush, dears, said Mrs. Honeychurch, who found it impossible to remain shocked. And do be sure you dry yourselves thoroughly first. All these colds come of not drying thoroughly. Mother, do come away, said Lucy. Oh, for goodness' sake, do come. Hello, cried George, so that again the ladies stopped. He regarded himself as dressed, barefoot, bare-chested, radiant and personable against the shadowy woods. He called, Hello, Miss Honeychurch. Hello. Bow, Lucy. Better bow. Whoever is it, I shall bow. Miss Honeychurch bowed. That evening and all that night the water ran away. On the morrow the pool had shrunk to its old size and lost its glory. It had been a call to the blood and to the relaxed will, a passing benediction whose influence did not pass, a holiness, a spell, a momentary chalice for youth. Chapter 13. How Miss Bartlett's boiler was so tiresome. How often had Lucy rehearsed this bow, this interview, but she had always rehearsed them indoors, and with certain accessories which surely we have a right to assume. Who could foretell that she and George would meet in the rout of a civilization, amidst an army of coats and collars and boots that lay wounded over the sunlit earth? She had imagined a young Mr. Emerson, who might be shy or morbid or indifferent or furtively impudent. She was prepared for all of these, but she had never imagined one who would be happy and greet her with the shout of the morning star. Indoors herself, partaking of tea with old Mrs. Butterworth, she reflected that it is impossible to foretell the future with any degree of accuracy, that it is impossible to rehearse life. A fault in the scenery, a face in the audience, an eruption of the audience onto the stage, and all our carefully planned gestures mean nothing or mean too much. I will bow, she had thought. I will not shake hands with him. That will be just the proper thing. She had bowed, but to whom? To gods, to heroes, to the nonsense of schoolgirls. She had bowed across the rubbish that cumbers the world. So ran her thoughts, while her faculties were busy with Cecil. It was another of those dreadful engagement calls. Mrs. Butterworth had wanted to see him, and he did not want to be seen. He did not want to hear about hydrangeas, why they change their colour at the seaside. He did not want to join the COS. When cross, he was always elaborate, and made long, clever answers where yes or no would have done. Lucy soothed him and tinkered at the conversation in a way that promised well for their married peace. No one is perfect, and surely it is wiser to discover the imperfections before wedlock. Miss Bartlett, indeed, though not in word, had taught the girl that this our life contains nothing satisfactory. Lucy, though she disliked the teacher, regarded the teaching as profound and applied it to her lover. "Lucy," said her mother, when they got home, "is anything the matter with Cecil?" The question was ominous. Up till now, Mrs. Honeychurch had behaved with charity and restraint. "No, I don't think so, Mother. Cecil's all right. Perhaps he's tired." Lucy compromised. Perhaps Cecil was a little tired. Because otherwise, she pulled out her bonnet pins with gathering displeasure, because otherwise I cannot account for him. I do think Mrs. Butterworth is rather tiresome, if you mean that. Cecil has told you to think so. You were devoted to her as a little girl, and nothing will describe her goodness to you through the typhoid fever. No, it is just the same thing everywhere. Let me just put your bonnet away, may I? Surely he could answer her civilly for 1/2 hour. Cecil has a very high standard for people, faltered Lucy, seeing trouble ahead. It's part of his ideals. It is really that makes him sometimes seem— Oh, rubbish! If high ideals make a young man rude, the sooner he gets rid of them the better, said Mrs. Honeychurch, handing her the bonnet. Now, Mother, I've seen you cross with Mrs. Butterworth yourself. Not in that way. At times I could wring her neck, but not in that way. Number. It is the same with Cecil all over. By the by, I never told you. I had a letter from Charlotte while I was away in London. This attempt to divert the conversation was too puerile, and Mrs. Honeychurch resented it. Since Cecil came back from London, nothing appears to please him. Whenever I speak, he winces. I see him, Lucy. It is useless to contradict me. No doubt I am neither artistic nor literary, nor intellectual nor musical, but I cannot help the drawing-room furniture. Your father bought it, and we must put up with it. Will Cecil kindly remember? I see what you mean, and certainly Cecil oughtn't to. But he does not mean to be uncivil. He once explained. It is the things that upset him. He is easily upset by ugly things. He is not uncivil to people. Is it a thing or a person when Freddie sings? You can't expect a really musical person to enjoy comic songs as we do. Then why didn't he leave the room? Why sit wriggling and sneering and spoiling everyone's pleasure? We mustn't be unjust to people, faltered Lucy. Something had enfeebled her, and the case for Cecil, which she had mastered so perfectly in London, would not come forth in an effective form. The two civilizations had clashed. Cecil hinted that they might, and she was dazzled and bewildered, as though the radiance that lies behind all civilization had blinded her eyes. Good taste and bad taste were only catchwords, garments of diverse cut, and music itself dissolved to a whisper through pine trees, where the song is not distinguishable from the comic song. She remained in much embarrassment while Mrs. Honeychurch changed her frock for dinner, and every now and then she said a word and made things no better. There was no concealing the fact. Cecil had meant to be supercilious, and he had succeeded. And Lucy, she knew not why, wished that the trouble could have come at any other time. Go and dress, dear. You'll be late. All right, Mother. Don't say all right and stop. Go. She obeyed, but loitered disconsolately at the landing window. It faced north, so there was little view and no view of the sky. Now, as in the winter, the pine trees hung close to her eyes. One connected the landing window with depression. No definite problem menaced her, but she sighed to herself. Oh, dear. What shall I do? What shall I do? It seemed to her that everyone else was behaving very badly, and she ought not to have mentioned Miss Bartlett's letter. She must be more careful. Her mother was rather inquisitive, and might have asked what it was about. Oh, dear, what should she do? And then Freddie came bounding upstairs and joined the ranks of the ill-behaved. I say, those are topping people. My dear baby, how tiresome you've been. You have no business to take them bathing in the sacred lake. It's much too public. It was all right for you, but most awkward for everyone else. Do be more careful. You forget the place is growing half suburban. I say, is anything on tomorrow week? Not that I know of. Then I want to ask the Emersons up to Sunday tennis. Oh, I wouldn't do that, Freddie. I wouldn't do that with all this muddle. What's wrong with the court? They won't mind a bump or two, and I've ordered new balls. I meant it's better not. I really mean it. He seized her by the elbows and humorously danced her up and down the passage. She pretended not to mind, but she could have screamed with temper. Cecil glanced at them as he proceeded to his toilet, and they impeded Mary with her brood of hot water cans. Then Mrs. Honeychurch opened her door and said, Lucy, what a noise you're making. I have something to say to you. Did you say you had had a letter from Charlotte? And Freddie ran away. Yes, I really can't stop. I must dress too. How's Charlotte? All right. Lucy? The unfortunate girl returned. You've a bad habit of hurrying away in the middle of one's sentences. Did Charlotte mention her boiler? Her what? Don't you remember that her boiler was to be had out in October, and her bath cistern cleaned out, and all kinds of terrible to-doings? I can't remember all Charlotte's worries, said Lucy bitterly. I shall have enough of my own now that you are not pleased with Cecil. Mrs. Honeychurch might have flamed out. She did not. She said, Come here, old lady. Thank you for putting away my bonnet. Kiss me. And, though nothing is perfect, Lucy felt for the moment that her mother and Windy Corner and the Weald in the declining sun were perfect. So the grittiness went out of life. It generally did at Windy Corner. At the last minute, when the social machine was clogged hopelessly, one member or other of the family poured in a drop of oil. Cecil despised their methods, perhaps rightly. At all events, they were not his own. Dinner was at 7:30. Freddie gabbled the grace, and they drew up their heavy chairs and fell to. Fortunately, the men were hungry. Nothing untoward occurred until the pudding. Then Freddie said, Lucy, what's Emerson like? I saw him in Florence, said Lucy, hoping that this would pass for a reply. Is he the clever sort, or is he a decent chap? Ask Cecil. It is Cecil who brought him here. He is the clever sort, like myself, said Cecil. Freddie looked at him doubtfully. How well did you know them at the Bertolini? Asked Mrs. Honeychurch. Oh, very slightly. I mean, Charlotte knew them even less than I did. Oh, that reminds me. You never told me what Charlotte said in her letter. One thing and another, said Lucy, wondering whether she would get through the meal without a lie. Among other things, that an awful friend of hers had been bicycling through Summer Street, wondered if she'd come up and see us, and mercifully didn't. Lucy, I do call the way you talk unkind. She was a novelist, said Lucy craftily. The remark was a happy one, for nothing roused Mrs. Honeychurch so much as literature in the hands of females. She would abandon every topic to inveigh against those women who, instead of minding their houses and their children, seek notoriety by print. Her attitude was, if books must be written, let them be written by men. and she developed it at great length, while Cecil yawned and Freddie played at this year, next year, now, never, with his plum stones, and Lucy artfully fed the flames of her mother's wrath. But soon the conflagration died down, and the ghosts began to gather in the darkness. There were too many ghosts about. The original ghost, that touch of lips on her cheek, had surely been laid long ago. It could be nothing to her that a man had kissed her on a mountain once. But it had begotten a spectral family, Mr. Harris, Miss Bartlett's letter, Mr. Beebe's memories of violets, and one or other of these was bound to haunt her before Cecil's very eyes. It was Miss Bartlett who returned now, and with appalling vividness. "I've been thinking, Lucy, of that letter of Charlotte's. How is she?" I tore the thing up. "Didn't she say how she was? How does she sound? Cheerful?" "Oh, yes, I suppose so. No, not very cheerful, I suppose." "Then depend upon it, it is the boiler. I know myself how water preys upon one's mind. I would rather anything else, even a misfortune with the meat." Cecil laid his hand over his eyes. "So would I," asserted Freddie, backing his mother up, backing up the spirit of her remark rather than the substance. "And I have been thinking," she added rather nervously, "surely we could squeeze Charlotte in here next week and give her a nice holiday while the plumbers at Tunbridge Wells finish. I have not seen poor Charlotte for so long." It was more than her nerves could stand, and she could not protest violently after her mother's goodness to her upstairs. "Mother, no," she pleaded. "It's impossible. We can't have Charlotte on the top of the other things. We're squeezed to death as it is. Freddie's got a friend coming Tuesday. There's Cecil, and you've promised to take in Minnie Beebe because of the diphtheria scare. It simply can't be done." "Nonsense. It can. If Minnie sleeps in the bath, not otherwise. Minnie can sleep with you." "I won't have her." "Then, if you're so selfish, Mr. Floyd must share a room with Freddie." "Miss Bartlett, Miss Bartlett, Miss Bartlett," moaned Cecil, again laying his hand over his eyes. "It's impossible," repeated Lucy. "I don't want to make difficulties, but it really isn't fair on the maids to fill up the house so." "Alas, the truth is, dear, you don't like Charlotte." "No, I don't, and no more does Cecil. She gets on our nerves. You haven't seen her lately, and don't realize how tiresome she can be, though so good. So please, Mother, don't worry us this last summer, but spoil us by not asking her to come." "Here, here," said Cecil. Mrs. Honeychurch, with more gravity than usual, and with more feeling than she usually permitted herself, replied, "This isn't very kind of you two. You have each other and all these woods to walk in, so full of beautiful things, and poor Charlotte has only the water turned off and plumbers. You are young, dears, and however clever young people are, and however many books they read, they will never guess what it feels like to grow old." Cecil crumbled his bread. "I must say Cousin Charlotte was very kind to me that year I called on my bike," put in Freddie. "She thanked me for coming till I felt like such a fool, and fussed round no end to get an egg boiled for my tea just right." "I know, dear, she is kind to everyone, and yet Lucy makes this difficulty when we try to give her some little return." But Lucy hardened her heart. It was no good being kind to Miss Bartlett. She had tried herself too often and too recently. One might lay up treasure in heaven by the attempt, but one enriched neither Miss Bartlett nor anyone else upon earth. She was reduced to saying, "I can't help it, Mother. I don't like Charlotte. I admit it's horrid of me." "From your own account, you told her as much." "Well, she would leave Florence so stupidly. She flurried." The ghosts were returning. They filled Italy. They were even usurping the places she had known as a child. The sacred lake would never be the same again, and, on Sunday week, something would even happen to Windy Corner. How would she fight against ghosts? For a moment, the visible world faded away, and memories and emotions alone seemed real. "I suppose Miss Bartlett must come, since she boils eggs so well," said Cecil, who was in rather a happier frame of mind, thanks to the admirable cooking. "I didn't mean the egg was well boiled," corrected Freddie, "because in point of fact she forgot to take it off, and as a matter of fact I don't care for eggs. I only meant how jolly kind she seemed. Cecil frowned again. Oh, these Honeychurches. Eggs, boilers, hydrangeas, maids. Of such were their lives compact. "May me and Lucy get down from our chairs?" he asked, with scarcely veiled insolence. "We don't want no dessert." Chapter 14. How Lucy faced the external situation bravely. Of course Miss Bartlett accepted, and, equally of course, she felt sure that she would prove a nuisance and beg to be given an inferior spare room, something with no view, anything. Her love to Lucy. And, equally of course, George Emerson could come to tennis on the Sunday week. Lucy faced the situation bravely, though, like most of us, she only faced the situation that encompassed her. She never gazed inwards. If at times strange images rose from the depths, she put them down to nerves. When Cecil brought the Emersons to Summer Street, it had upset her nerves. Charlotte would burnish up past foolishness, and this might upset her nerves. She was nervous at night. When she talked to George, they met again almost immediately at the rectory. His voice moved her deeply, and she wished to remain near him. How dreadful if she really wished to remain near him. Of course, the wish was due to nerves, which love to play such perverse tricks upon us. Once she had suffered from things that came out of nothing and meant she didn't know what. Now Cecil had explained psychology to her one wet afternoon, and all the troubles of youth in an unknown world could be dismissed. It is obvious enough for the reader to conclude she loves young Emerson. A reader in Lucy's place would not find it obvious. Life is easy to chronicle, but bewildering to practice, and we welcome nerves or any other shibboleth that will cloak our personal desire. She loved Cecil. George made her nervous. Will the reader explain to her that the phrases should have been reversed? But the external situation, she will face that bravely. The meeting at the rectory had passed off well enough. Standing between Mr. Beebe and Cecil, she had made a few temperate allusions to Italy, and George had replied. She was anxious to show that she was not shy, and was glad that he did not seem shy either. "A nice fellow," said Mr. Beebe afterwards. "He will work off his crudities in time. I rather mistrust young men who slip into life gracefully." Lucy said, "He seems in better spirits. He laughs more." "Yes," replied the clergyman. "He is waking up." That was all. But, as the week wore on, more of her defences fell, and she entertained an image that had physical beauty. In spite of the clearest directions, Miss Bartlett contrived to bungle her arrival. She was due at the southeastern station at Dorking, whither Mrs. Honeychurch drove to meet her. She arrived at the London and Brighton station, and had to hire a cab up. No one was at home except Freddie and his friend, who had to stop their tennis and to entertain her for a solid hour. Cecil and Lucy turned up at 4 o'clock, and these, with little Minnie Beebe, made a somewhat lugubrious sextet upon the upper lawn for tea. "I shall never forgive myself," said Miss Bartlett, who kept on rising from her seat and had to be begged by the United Company to remain. "I have upset everything. Bursting in on young people. But I insist on paying for my cab up. Grant that, at any rate." "Our visitors never do such dreadful things," said Lucy, while her brother, in whose memory the boiled egg had already grown unsubstantial, exclaimed in irritable tones, "Just what I've been trying to convince Cousin Charlotte of Lucy for the last half hour." "I do not feel myself an ordinary visitor," said Miss Bartlett, and looked at her frayed glove. "All right, if you'd really rather. 5 shillings, and I gave a bob to the driver." Miss Bartlett looked in her purse. Only sovereigns and pennies. Could anyone give her change? Freddie had half a quid, and his friend had 4 half-crowns. Miss Bartlett accepted their moneys and then said, "But who am I to give the sovereign to?" "Let's leave it all till Mother comes back," suggested Lucy. "No, dear. Your mother may take quite a long drive now that she is not hampered with me. We all have our little foibles, and mine is the prompt settling of accounts." Here Freddie's friend, Mr. Floyd, made the one remark of his that need be quoted. He offered to toss Freddie for Miss Bartlett's quid. A solution seemed in sight, and even Cecil, who had been ostentatiously drinking his tea at the view, felt the eternal attraction of chance. and turned round. But this did not do either. Please, please. I know I am a sad spoil-sport, but it would make me wretched. I should practically be robbing the one who lost. Freddie owes me 15 shillings, interposed Cecil, so it will work out right if you give the pound to me. 15 shillings, said Miss Bartlett dubiously. How is that, Mr. Vyse? Because don't you see, Freddie paid your cab. Give me the pound, and we shall avoid this deplorable gambling. Miss Bartlett, who was poor at figures, became bewildered and rendered up the sovereign amidst the suppressed gurgles of the other youths. For a moment, Cecil was happy. He was playing at nonsense among his peers. Then he glanced at Lucy, in whose face petty anxieties had marred the smiles. In January he would rescue his Leonardo from this stupefying twaddle. "But I don't see that," exclaimed Minnie Beebe, who had narrowly watched the iniquitous transaction. "I don't see why Mr. Vyse is to have the quid." "Because of the 15 shillings and the 5, they said solemnly. 15 shillings and 5 shillings make £1, you see." "But I don't see—" They tried to stifle her with cake. "No, thank you. I'm done. I don't see why. Freddie, don't poke me. Miss Honeychurch, your brother's hurting me. Ow! What about Mr. Floyd's 10 shillings? Ow! No, I don't see, and I never shall see why What's-her-name shouldn't pay that bob for the driver." "I had forgotten the driver," said Miss Bartlett, reddening. "Thank you, dear, for reminding me. A shilling, was it? Can anyone give me change for half a crown?" "I'll get it," said the young hostess, rising with decision. "Cecil, give me that sovereign. No, give me up that sovereign. I'll get Euphemia to change it, and we'll start the whole thing again from the beginning." "Lucy, Lucy, what a nuisance I am," protested Miss Bartlett, and followed her across the lawn. Lucy tripped ahead, simulating hilarity. When they were out of earshot, Miss Bartlett stopped her wails and said quite briskly, "Have you told him about him yet?" "No, I haven't," replied Lucy, and then could have bitten her tongue for understanding so quickly what her cousin meant. "Let me see, a sovereign's worth of silver." She escaped into the kitchen. Miss Bartlett's sudden transitions were too uncanny. It sometimes seemed as if she planned every word she spoke or caused to be spoken, as if all this worry about cabs and change had been a ruse to surprise the soul. "No, I haven't told Cecil or anyone," she remarked when she returned. "I promised you I shouldn't. Here is your money, all shillings except 2 half-crowns. Would you count it? You can settle your debt nicely now." Miss Bartlett was in the drawing-room, gazing at the photograph of Saint John ascending, which had been framed. "How dreadful!" she murmured. "How more than dreadful, if Mr. Vyse should come to hear of it from some other source." "Oh, no, Charlotte," said the girl, entering the battle. "George Emerson is all right. And what other source is there?" Miss Bartlett considered. "For instance, the driver. I saw him looking through the bushes at you. Remember, he had a violet between his teeth." Lucy shuddered a little. "We shall get the silly affair on our nerves if we aren't careful. How could a Florentine cab driver ever get hold of Cecil?" "We must think of every possibility." "Oh, it's all right. Or perhaps old Mr. Emerson knows. In fact, he is certain to know." "I don't care if he does. I was grateful to you for your letter, but even if the news does get round, I think I can trust Cecil to laugh at it." "To contradict it?" "No, to laugh at it." But she knew in her heart that she could not trust him, for he desired her untouched. "Very well, dear. You know best. Perhaps gentlemen are different to what they were when I was young. Ladies are certainly different. Now, Charlotte," she struck at her playfully, "you kind, anxious thing. What would you have me do? First you say, 'Don't tell,' and then you say, 'Tell.' Which is it to be? Quick." Miss Bartlett sighed. "I am no match for you in conversation, dearest. I blush when I think how I interfered at Florence, and you so well able to look after yourself, and so much cleverer in all ways than I am. You will never forgive me." "Shall we go out, then? They will smash all the china if we don't." For the air rang with the shrieks of Minnie, who was being scalped with a teaspoon. "Dear, one moment. We may not have this chance for a chat again. Have you seen the young one yet?" "Yes, I have." "What happened?" "We met at the rectory." "What line is he taking up?" "No line. He talked about Italy like any other person. It is really all right. What advantage would he get from being a cad, to put it bluntly? I do wish I could make you see it my way. He really won't be any nuisance, Charlotte. Once a cad, always a cad. That is my poor opinion." Lucy paused. "Cecil said one day, and I thought it so profound, that there are two kinds of cads, the conscious and the subconscious." She paused again to be sure of doing justice to Cecil's profundity. Through the window she saw Cecil himself, turning over the pages of a novel. It was a new one from Smith's library. Her mother must have returned from the station. "Once a cad, always a cad," droned Miss Bartlett. "What I mean by subconscious is that Emerson lost his head. I fell into all those violets, and he was silly and surprised. I don't think we ought to blame him very much. It makes such a difference when you see a person with beautiful things behind him unexpectedly. It really does. It makes an enormous difference. And he lost his head. He doesn't admire me, or any of that nonsense. One straw. Freddie rather likes him, and has asked him up here on Sunday, so you can judge for yourself. He has improved. He doesn't always look as if he's going to burst into tears. He is a clerk in the general manager's office at one of the big railways, not a porter, and runs down to his father for weekends. Papa was to do with journalism, but is rheumatic and has retired. There, now for the garden." She took hold of her guest by the arm. "Suppose we don't talk about this silly Italian business any more. We want you to have a nice restful visit at Windy Corner, with no worriting." Lucy thought this rather a good speech. The reader may have detected an unfortunate slip in it. Whether Miss Bartlett detected the slip one cannot say, for it is impossible to penetrate into the minds of elderly people. She might have spoken further, but they were interrupted by the entrance of her hostess. Explanations took place, and in the midst of them Lucy escaped, the images throbbing a little more vividly in her brain.